The lights in the emergency ward flicker once, then steady. A gurney slams into a wall. Someone is shouting orders that do not belong to this building. She stands near the medication cart, hands steady, eyes down. A nurse. Ignored. Boots cross the floor too fast for a hospital. Radios hiss. Rifles are lowered but ready. A senior officer snaps for compliance. No one argues. She looks up only once. She does not raise her voice. She does not introduce herself. The room goes quiet. Not because of fear. Because something in her tone tells them they misjudged who they were talking to. The hospital settled into its night posture the way it always did. Lights dimmed but never dark, alarms tuned low, voices reduced to essentials. Machines breathed for people who could not. Shoes whispered along waxed floors. Everything unnecessary was stripped away. She moved through it without hurry. Her badge read registered nurse. Last name only. No titles. No markings that distinguished her from the others on the floor. She checked 4 lines, adjusted monitors, signed off on charts. Each motion was economical. Nothing wasted. Nothing rushed. Most people did not look at her long enough to notice. At the central desk, a junior resident argued quietly with a charge nurse about bed availability. Down the hall, a trauma patient slept under sedation, chest rising in a measured rhythm. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air, sharp and clean. She paused at room 312. The monitor showed a stable waveform, but she stood there longer than required. Not staring. Listening. The sound of the floor. The pattern of footsteps beyond the wall. The timing of doors opening and closing. After a moment, she adjusted the drip rate by a fraction, documented it, and moved on. A security guard passed her near the elevators. He nodded, distracted, eyes on his phone. She noted the weight of his steps, the set of his shoulders, the way his radio clipped too loosely to his belt. She said nothing. In the break room, 2 nurses spoke in low voices about overtime and staffing cuts. Someone laughed once, quickly, as if embarrassed by the sound. She poured coffee, black, and listened without joining. When an alarm chirped 3 rooms down, she was already walking before it fully registered. The resident arrived seconds later, slightly out of breath. She had stabilized the patient by the time he reached the bedside. "Thanks," he said, already turning to leave. She acknowledged it with a nod and returned to the corridor. The night was supposed to be quiet. It usually was. But quiet had texture, and tonight the texture felt wrong. At 1:17, a set of automatic doors opened on the far side of the emergency entrance. Not slammed. Not rushed. Just opened, held, then closed again. She did not see it, but she felt the pause ripple through the building. At 1:19, the internal phone rang at the desk. A clipped voice asked for confirmation of floor access routes. The clerk answered, confused, flipping through a binder. The voice thanked her and disconnected. She made a note in her head and continued her rounds. In the supply room, she restocked gloves and gauze with the same care she used for everything else. Items aligned. Counts exact. She checked expiration dates without needing to read them closely. A patient down the hall began to stir, murmuring through sleep. She adjusted the blanket, placed a hand briefly on the man's shoulder, not comforting, just steady. His breathing slowed. He did not wake. At 1:26, the elevators chimed again. This time more than once. The sound carried differently, heavier. The kind of weight that came with equipment. She was at the nurse's station when the first unfamiliar voices reached the floor. Oh, controlled. Not hospital voices. The charge nurse straightened. "Do we have transfers coming up?" No one answered. She closed the chart and slid it into its slot. Her posture did not change, but her attention narrowed. She positioned herself where she could see both corridors without appearing to watch either. The doors opened. Men in uniform stepped out, boots quiet but deliberate. No insignia she recognized at a glance. Their eyes moved continuously, cataloging exits, corners, people. One of them spoke into a radio without breaking stride. The charge nurse approached them, professional but tense. "This area is restricted. Can I help you?" A man with gray at his temples handed over a document. "Federal authority. Temporary control. We'll need this floor cleared for operational use." The words landed heavily, but the tone did not invite discussion. The charge nurse looked at the paper, then back at him. "We have critical patients. We're aware." The men began to spread out, efficient, practiced. Staff stepped back instinctively. Someone whispered a question. No one answered it. She remained by the desk, hands resting lightly on the counter. One of the men glanced at her badge, then away. To him she was exactly what she appeared to be. A A nurse on night shift. Replaceable. Peripheral. She watched them take the space, measuring distances, noting command flow. She did not interfere. Not yet. When the gray-haired man raised his voice to issue the first real order, she looked up. Only briefly. Enough to understand what had just entered her hospital. And enough to know that before the night was over, silence would have a cost. The uniforms moved with confidence, but not haste. That mattered. They did not run. They did not shout. They spread the way trained units did when they believed time was still on their side. One stayed near the elevators. Another took the stairwell. A third began speaking quietly with hospital security, turning requests into instructions without raising his voice. She watched the pattern form while continuing to work. A medication tray needed restocking. She did it. A call light blinked. She answered it. Her pace never changed, but her route subtly did. She took corners that gave longer sightlines. She lingered where reflections in glass showed more than direct angles ever would. The charge nurse was pulled aside by the gray-haired commander. Their voices were low, but the tension was visible in the way the nurse's shoulders locked. "We need access to imaging," the commander said. "And negative pressure rooms." "That wing is full," the nurse replied. "Ventilated patients. Moving them isn't. We'll decide what's possible." The sentence ended the discussion. She noted the language. Not aggressive. Absolute. It told her enough about the man's authority and how he expected it to be received. At 1:34, the first deviation became obvious. A man in civilian clothes was escorted through the corridor by 2 armed personnel. His hands were cuffed in front of him, hidden beneath a jacket. He was pale, sweating, breathing shallowly. Not a patient. Not yet. The men did not ask for a room assignment. They chose one. Room 318. Too close to the ICU boundary. Too exposed. A poor choice if discretion was the goal. She felt irritation surface and dismissed it just as quickly. Emotion was noise. This was information. As they passed, one of the armed men glanced at her. Not suspicious. Assessing. She met his eyes for half a second, then looked back to her chart. He moved on. Inside 318, voices rose briefly, then dropped. The door closed. A portable scanner hummed to life. The hospital began to feel smaller. At the desk, a resident whispered, "What's going on?" "No idea," the clerk said. "They said federal." The word hung there, heavy and undefined. She adjusted a monitor alarm that had begun to chirp unnecessarily. The sound stopped. No one thanked her. Another deviation followed soon after. The hospital's internal network lagged just for a second. Orders took longer to load. Access badges were revalidated one by one. She watched as a young nurse tapped her card twice before the door released. Network control. External access. Someone had thought ahead. She stopped at the supply closet nearest 318 and pretended to inventory syringes. Through the wall, she could hear breathing that did not match the rhythm of the machines. Fast. Shallow. Afraid. A voice spoke, male, strained. "I told you I already gave." "Enough," another voice cut in. "Come." Controlled. She did not stay long enough to hear more. At 1:41, the gray-haired commander addressed the floor. Not formally. Just loud enough. "We are conducting a contained operation. Patient care will continue as directed. Follow instructions given by my personnel. This will be resolved shortly." Shortly meant nothing. It was a placeholder word, used when outcomes were uncertain. She returned to the nurse's station and began updating charts that did not need updating. It gave her reason to stay. To listen. 2 of the armed men discussed sightlines near the stairwell. One mentioned external pressure. Another replied, "Not yet." Not yet meant it was coming. Her phone vibrated once in her pocket. No message. Just a network handshake, forced and silent. She ignored it. A patient in 314 began to desaturate. She responded immediately, adjusting oxygen, repositioning the mask. The resident hovered, flustered. "Do you need respiratory?" he asked. "Not yet," she said. Her voice was even. The patient stabilized within seconds. The resident exhaled, relieved. He did not notice that she had angled the bed slightly away from the corridor. He did not ask why. At 1:48, hospital security was formally dismissed from the floor. "Federal jurisdiction," the gray-haired commander said. "We've got it." The guards hesitated, then complied. Their radios were collected. Their presence removed. That was the moment she stopped pretending this was temporary. She stood at the desk, hands folded, eyes lowered. To anyone watching, she was just another nurse waiting for instructions. But she had already adjusted her mental map. Who was in charge? Who followed without thinking? Which orders were being obeyed too quickly? The crisis had not arrived yet. But the warning signs were no longer subtle. The formal takeover came without announcement. One moment, the hospital was negotiating. The next, it was owned. At 1:55, the gray-haired commander gave a short nod to his team. Radios clicked. Doors that had been merely guarded were now blocked. A temporary command post appeared at the end of the corridor. Folding table, secure tablet, maps projected against a blank wall where a family notice board had been an hour earlier. No one asked permission. Clear non-essential staff from this wing, the commander said. Patients remain. We control movement. The charge nurse stiffened. Define non-essential. The commander looked at her for the first time as if weighing whether the answer mattered. Anyone not directly required to keep someone alive in the next 60 minutes. The sentence landed hard. A few nurses protested quietly. A resident argued until one of the armed men met his eyes without blinking. The argument ended. She stood still, listening. 2 nurses were redirected to another floor. A technician was escorted out, confused, apologetic, carrying a tray he no longer had permission to use. The night tightened. Fewer voices. More empty space between sounds. She was not told to leave. That was not a courtesy. It was an oversight. She remained where she was because her presence did not register as a variable. Her badge gave her a function, and the function was acceptable. A younger officer approached the desk with a clipboard. We need a current census. Ventilators, oxygen dependency, medications that can't be interrupted. She handed him the list without comment. It was accurate. It was also incomplete. He did not notice. Down the hall, room 318 became the center of gravity. Armed personnel rotated in and out. No raised voices. No visible violence. But the air around the door felt compressed, as if the room were drawing pressure from the rest of the floor. She passed by once, carrying saline. The door opened just long enough for her to see the man inside slumped on the bed, cuffs still on, a blood pressure cuff biting into his arm. Sweat soaked the collar of his shirt. His eyes lifted when he saw her. They held for half a second. She gave nothing away. The door closed. At the command table, the gray-haired commander spoke into a secure line. We have him contained. Condition is stable enough for now. Extraction window still viable. Pause. He listened. Yes. Hospital is secure. She noted the word choice. Secure. Not safe. A junior nurse approached her, voice low. Do you know what's happening? She shook her head slightly. Not denial. Deflection. Just do your job, she said. Stay close to your patients. The nurse nodded, grateful for the certainty in the instruction, and moved on. At 2:07, an order came down to suspend all incoming admissions to the floor. The emergency department was notified after the fact. Tempers flared on the phone. The commander did not take the call. She did. She listened to the ER physician argue, then said only, redirect upstairs. Do not delay airway cases. Her tone was calm. The line went quiet. Who authorized that? The physician asked. She did not answer directly. Do it now. The physician hesitated, then complied. She hung up before the question could be repeated. No one challenged her because no one was paying attention. The gray-haired commander paced once, slow, controlled. His operation was clean, but something was wrong. He knew it. The way his jaw tightened when he checked his watch told her enough. At 2:13, a radio crackled. A voice on the other end was tight. Sir, we've got movement outside the perimeter. Medium maybe. Or worse. The commander closed his eyes briefly. Hold them. No escalation. No escalation meant the clock was running out. She stepped away from the desk and walked to the medication room. She needed space to think. Inside, the hum of refrigeration units covered any sound she made. She leaned lightly against the counter, eyes unfocused, and replayed what she had seen. The man in 318 was not just a detainee. He was an asset. Or a liability. Possibly both. Extraction meant removal. From the hospital. From care. And the hospital was not built for what was coming next. She straightened, collected the medication she actually needed, and returned to the corridor. As she passed the command table, the gray-haired commander glanced up, irritation already forming. This area is restricted. She stopped. Yes, she said. Not apologetic. Not defiant. Just factual. He waited for her to move on. She did not. I need access to room 318's vitals, she added. Your people are interfering with monitoring. The commander frowned. Medical decisions are being handled. They are being delayed, she replied. If his condition degrades, your extraction window collapses. The commander studied her now. Really looked. She met his gaze evenly. No challenge. No fear. After a beat, he nodded once. 5 minutes. She did not thank him. She turned and walked away. Behind her, the commander watched her go, unsettled by something he could not quite name. The hospital was no longer just a backdrop. It had become terrain. Room 318 smelled wrong. Not unclean. Not medical. It smelled of sweat and metal and the faint tang of fear that no amount of ventilation could fully remove. 2 armed men stood inside the room. One near the door. One near the bed. The man on the bed was half-sitting, wrists still cuffed, chest rising too fast. The monitor beeped with a shallow, irregular rhythm. She entered without asking. The man by the door shifted his weight. You can't be in here. She did not look at him. She walked straight to the monitor and read it in one glance. He's tachycardic, she said. And hypoxic. Your positioning is wrong. We were told not to uncuff him, the man near the bed said. I did not ask you to, she replied. She adjusted the oxygen flow, lifted the man's chin, shifted the pillow with careful precision. The movement was practiced, efficient. The monitor responded almost immediately. The armed men watched, uncertain. The detainee swallowed, eyes darting. They said. She placed a finger lightly against his wrist. Not to comfort. To count. Breathe through your nose, she said to him. Slowly. Her voice was calm. Not kind. Not harsh. He obeyed. Behind her, the man at the door spoke into his radio. Medical's interfering. She finished her adjustments, then turned slightly, not toward the man, but enough that he understood she was aware of him. If his oxygen drops again, she said, you will not extract him. You will intubate him. In this room. With cameras outside. Silence followed. That will complicate your situation, she added. And it will be recorded. The radio stayed quiet. She checked the 4-line, tightened the cuff, and documented the changes on the chart she carried with her. Her handwriting was precise, almost austere. The detainee's breathing slowed. His eyes closed for a moment. When she stepped back, the man near the bed finally spoke. Who are you? She met his gaze for the first time. Nursing staff, she said. Assigned to this floor. It was true. It was also insufficient. The gray-haired commander appeared in the doorway, drawn by the radio call. He took in the scene in a second. The stabilized monitor, the detainee calmer, his men uncertain. What's the problem? He asked. She answered without turning. You brought him in dehydrated and stressed. You cuffed him in a position that restricted breathing. You want him alive. The commander paused. Yes, he said carefully. Then you will give me 10 uninterrupted minutes every hour, she said. And you will remove 1 guard from this room. 2 is unnecessary and counterproductive. That's not your call. She finally turned to face him fully. If he aspirates, she said, your timeline collapses. If he codes, your authority becomes irrelevant. I am preventing both. The commander studied her. Not as a nurse now. As an obstacle with information. After a moment, he nodded to one of the guards. Step outside. The man hesitated, then complied. She did not acknowledge the concession. She gathered her supplies and moved toward the door. As she passed the commander, he spoke quietly. You're confident for someone without clearance. She stopped. Confidence isn't the issue, she said. Capacity is. She left the room. In the corridor, the tension had shifted. Staff watched her with new uncertainty. Not respect. Not yet. Something closer to relief mixed with confusion. A resident caught up to her. They're asking for imaging clearance. They want to move a ventilated patient to make space. Not yet, she said. Delay them. On whose authority? She met his eyes. Mine. He searched her face for a moment, then nodded and turned away. That cost her something. She felt it settle low and heavy. Each deviation increased the risk of being noticed, of being challenged. But the alternative was worse. At the command table, the gray-haired commander spoke into his phone again. His voice was tighter now. Medical complications are being managed. No, extraction cannot accelerate. He listened, jaw set. Yes, he said finally. I'm aware of the optics. She passed behind him without stopping. The hospital was no longer simply occupied. Lines were being drawn. And she had stepped across one. The shift was subtle enough that most people missed it. Orders still came from the command table. Radios still crackled with clipped confirmations. But the flow of decisions began to bend just slightly around her movements. She did not issue directives. She created conditions. When imaging was requested again, she did not refuse. She delayed by rerouting a transport team, by flagging a maintenance issue in the corridor that forced a longer path, by noting a medication interaction that required observation. Each reason was valid. Each delay bought minutes. Minutes mattered. In room 314, she repositioned a ventilated patient and adjusted sedation. The resident watched closely. "You're anticipating something," he said quietly. She did not look up. "I'm preventing it." He nodded, uncertain, but he stayed and followed her lead. That too mattered. At the command table, the gray-haired commander listened as a subordinate reported another delay. "Medical again?" the commander asked. "Yes, sir." The commander's eyes tracked down the corridor until they found her, standing near the nurse's station, reviewing a chart that did not need review. He watched her for a long moment. "Let it stand," he said finally. "For now." She felt the weight of that decision settle into the room like pressure before a storm. He was not conceding control. He was recalibrating. In 318, the detainee's vitals stabilized further. His color improved. His breathing deepened. She adjusted the 4 and checked neurological response with a light touch, careful not to provoke fear. "They told me this would be quick," he said, voice hoarse. She did not answer the implication. "You need to stay conscious," she said. "If you feel dizzy, tell me." He nodded. One of the remaining guards shifted uneasily. "He's asking questions." "He's allowed to talk," she said. "He's not allowed to deteriorate." The guard fell silent. Outside the room, a young officer approached her. His posture was rigid, respectful without being deferential. "Ma'am," he said, then hesitated at the word. "Sir, Commander wants to know your recommendation on timing." She regarded him for a moment. "Not assessing rank. Assessing judgment." "Not before dawn," she said. "And not from this floor." The officer blinked. "Extraction team is staged." "Then they can wait," she replied. "Your perimeter won't hold once daylight hits. You'll need a controlled transfer, not a rush." He absorbed this, then nodded once. "I'll relay." He did not ask her authority. He had already decided it was sufficient. That was the shift. It did not announce itself. It did not come with acknowledgement. But it was real. At 2:42, the external pressure intensified. Voices rose faintly from outside the building. Vehicles repositioned. The commander received another call, this one shorter, sharper. "No," he said into the phone. "We are not escalating." He ended the call and looked down the corridor again. She was adjusting a monitor alarm, lowering it just enough to keep it from drawing attention. When she finished, she met his gaze without expression. He walked toward her this time. "You're changing the tempo," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "Why?" "Because the current one ends badly," she said. "For you. For him. For this hospital." The commander studied her face. There was no urgency in it. No ambition. Just certainty shaped by experience. "You've done this before," he said. She did not answer. After a moment he nodded once. "Keep doing what you're doing." It was not permission. It was reliance. As he turned away, she felt the cost of it settle in. Every step deeper into control narrowed her exit. The longer this lasted, the harder it would be to return to anonymity. But the crisis was still climbing. And restraint, now, was the only thing holding it together. The call that changed the temperature of the room did not come through the hospital lines. It came through the commander's secure handset. One vibration. One glance at the screen. Then his posture shifted, just enough that she noticed. He stepped away from the command table and spoke in a low voice, turned partially toward the wall. The words themselves were indistinct, but the cadence was not. This was not coordination. This was correction. She continued moving through her tasks, but her attention narrowed. When he returned, the commander did not sit. He stood with both hands on the table, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on the projected map. "Timeline has moved up," he said to his team. "We are under directive to resolve before first light." One of the officers hesitated. "Medical advised." "I'm aware," the commander said. His voice was even, but the edges were tighter now. "That advice is noted." She felt the shift ripple outward. Radios clicked more frequently. Footsteps increased. The quiet efficiency began to fray. In room 318, the detainee sensed it immediately. "They're not waiting, are they?" he asked when she checked his vitals. She secured the blood pressure cuff and released it. You need to conserve energy, she said. Speculation won't help you. That's not an answer. She met his eyes briefly. It's the one you're getting. Outside the room, an extraction team arrived on the floor. Different uniforms. Heavier equipment. Their presence alone narrowed the corridors. The hospital was not built for this density of force. A respiratory therapist approached her, voice low. They want to move 2 ICU patients to clear the route. No, she said immediately. They're insisting. She closed the chart she was holding. Then they're wrong. The therapist hesitated. They outrank. Not here, she said. Not when the outcome is preventable. The therapist nodded and moved away quickly, relieved to pass the burden back to her. That cost her again. At the command table, the commander watched the extraction team stage. He turned when he felt her presence. This is no longer just medical risk, he said. We're being leaned on. Yes, she replied. That was always going to happen. Above my pay grade, he added. She considered him for a moment. Then you have a choice. He waited. You can follow the directive and accept the collateral, she said. Or you can slow this down and explain later why you didn't. His jaw tightened. You don't know who's on the other end of that line. I know exactly who it is, she said. Because they're not here. Silence followed. Around them, the floor felt compressed like a held breath. Staff moved faster now, less coordinated. Small mistakes began to appear. Misplaced equipment, repeated questions, a medication almost administered twice. She corrected each one without comment. In 318, the detainee's heart rate spiked again. Not from physiology. From fear. They told me extraction would be clean, he said, voice shaking despite himself. That they wouldn't. She adjusted his position and leaned in just enough that he could hear her over the machines. If you lose consciousness, she said quietly, they will rush. That is when mistakes happen. You need to stay with me. He swallowed and nodded, focusing on her voice. Outside, the extraction team requested final clearance. The commander did not respond immediately. He looked at her. If this goes wrong, he said, it's on me. Yes, she replied. That's what command means. The word hung between them, heavy, deliberate. He turned back to his team. Stand by, he said. We are holding. A beat passed. Then another call came through. This one was shorter. Yes, the commander said. I understand. He ended the call and exhaled slowly. They're not happy, he said to her. And they're sending someone. She nodded once. They always do. The hospital lights hummed overhead. Dawn was still hours away, but the window for quiet control was closing. When the next authority arrived, restraint alone would no longer be enough. The arrival was announced by silence. Radios stopped. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Even the machines seemed louder for a moment, as if the building itself had noticed the change. The man who stepped off the elevator wore no visible rank. No insignia. No weapon displayed. His suit was dark, unremarkable, tailored for movement rather than appearance. Everyone moved aside without being told. He did not look around. He walked directly to the command table. I'm taking over, he said. The gray-haired commander did not argue. He stepped back half a pace and gestured to the map. Detainee stabilized. Extraction delayed due to medical constraints. The man in the suit nodded once. That delay ends now. His eyes moved down the corridor and settled on her. Not with curiosity. With recognition. She felt the cost arrive before she felt fear. He approached her slowly, stopping just outside arm's length. You're the nurse, he said. Not a question. Yes. You've overridden operational tempo, redirected resources, and influenced command decisions without clearance. Yes. The word landed cleanly. No defense. No justification. The floor seemed to hold its breath. The man studied her face, searching for something, hesitation, arrogance, uncertainty. He found none. What's your recommendation? He asked. Right now? This was the moment she had been delaying. She glanced toward room 318. Toward the man on the bed, cuffed, exhausted, alive. Toward the patients down the hall who would not survive a rushed evacuation. Toward the staff who had followed her without understanding why. Then she spoke. If you extract him in the next 30 minutes, she said, you will lose him on the way out or create a public incident you cannot contain. If you wait until first controlled transfer window, you preserve the asset, the hospital, and your deniability. The man's eyes narrowed. And how do you know that? She met his gaze. Because I have executed this timeline, she said, from the other side of the table. The words did not echo. They did not need to. Something shifted. The gray-haired commander straightened slightly. Officers nearby stopped pretending not to listen. The man in the suit held her eyes for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You're out of uniform." "Yes." "You're also out of position." "Yes." Pause. "Name," he said. She hesitated. "Just long enough." "That information complicates things," she replied. The man considered this, then nodded once. "Very well." He turned to the commander. "We hold. Medical lead stands." The commander blinked, then recovered. "Yes, sir." The man in the suit looked back at her. "This does not go on your record," he said. "It also does not disappear." "I understand." "You will stay here until transfer," he said. "Then you will return to whatever role you are pretending is small." She accepted the sentence without reaction. As he walked away, the floor exhaled. The cost settled in fully now. She had crossed the last line. There would be questions later. Files opened. Names connected. But the immediate crisis had bent, not broken. In room 318, the detainee looked at her with something close to trust. "What did you tell them?" She adjusted his fore and checked his pupils. "Enough," she said. Outside, preparations shifted, not faster but cleaner. Equipment was staged with care. Routes were adjusted to avoid patient areas. The extraction team recalibrated. Control had returned, but it no longer belonged to the loudest voice. It belonged to the one who had spoken once and paid for it. The final movement began without urgency. That was deliberate. The extraction team reconfigured their approach, lighter now, stripped of anything unnecessary. Weapons were slung, not raised. Equipment was staged in the service corridor instead of the main hall. The hospital remained functional, breathing through the operation instead of around it. She walked the route once, alone. Not to supervise. To verify. She checked door widths, elevator timing, oxygen handoff points. She noted where sound carried and where it died. A rolling cart was repositioned by 6 inches to prevent a blind corner. A sign was turned slightly so it blocked a direct line of sight from the waiting area. Small things. Quiet things. They mattered. In room 318, the detainee was dressed in a hospital gown now, cuffs replaced with soft restraints that allowed circulation. His color was good. His vitals steady. He watched her hands as she worked. "They're taking me out," he said. "Yes," she replied. "Alive." "That depends on you," she said. "And on them listening." He nodded, focusing again on his breathing. The man in the suit stood outside the room watching through the glass. He spoke without turning. "You're certain this holds?" "Yes." "And if it doesn't?" "Then it fails slowly," she said. "Not catastrophically." That was the difference. That was why he had listened. The gray-haired commander approached, helmet under his arm. "We move in 2 minutes." She checked her watch. 3, she said. "The elevator cycle is off by 40 seconds. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. 3, he agreed. The transfer began. The bed rolled smoothly, guided by hands that understood restraint. No rushing. No shouted commands. Staff were cleared ahead of time, redirected without explanation. A nurse cried quietly in a doorway until someone closed it for her. In the elevator the air felt thin. Too many bodies. Too much equipment. She stood at the head of the bed, one hand on the rail, the other near the oxygen line. When the detainee's heart rate spiked, she adjusted flow without comment. When his eyes fluttered, she spoke once, low and steady. "Stay with me." He did. Halfway down, a radio crackled. External movement near the ambulance bay. The man in the suit stiffened. "Hold," someone said. "No," she replied immediately. "We continue." All eyes turned to her. "If you stop now," she said, "you create panic. Panic creates footage. Keep moving." The elevator doors opened. The corridor beyond was clear. Not empty, clear. There was a difference. The ambulance bay lights were harsh, unforgiving. Cameras hovered somewhere beyond the perimeter. She felt them without seeing them. The transfer to the gurney was clean. The oxygen line held. The detainee did not lose consciousness. As the doors closed behind him, the sound changed. The hospital reclaimed itself. The crisis ended not with a shout, but with absence. She stood still for a moment, then turned back toward the elevators. No one stopped her. The hospital breathed again, but not fully. Hallways smelled of antiseptic, but beneath it lingered the residue of tension, sweat, fear, adrenaline. Staff moved more cautiously now, aware that the night had not been ordinary. Conversations were quieter, measured, half-formed. No one knew exactly what had happened, only that someone had held the floor together while chaos pressed in. She returned to her station. Charts were incomplete, alarms needed resetting, and a ventilated patient still required care. She moved with the same calm, steady efficiency as before, the night's work indistinguishable from her usual tasks to anyone observing superficially. The gray-haired commander approached, his face tired but not defeated. "You did well," he said quietly. She looked up, expression neutral. "We all did what needed to be done." He nodded, understanding both the words and the restraint behind them. There was recognition in his eyes, unspoken and brief, but she did not linger to receive it. There was nothing left to earn here. The man in the suit had left. Extraction was complete. No one questioned how it had been done. No debriefs, no public acknowledgement. Only reports and internal notes. Quiet victories, contained and unheralded. She walked past the nurse's station. Residents glanced at her with lingering questions. Staff followed procedures more attentively than before. She did not correct them. She did not instruct. She merely existed within the flow she had subtly directed. Her authority was invisible yet absolute. In room 314 she adjusted a patient's oxygen mask. In room 318, the detainee's absence was noted only in a chart. The silence that filled the space was heavy. The crisis was over, but the imprint of what had occurred remained. She felt it in her shoulders, in the careful placement of each hand on a bed rail, in the soft click of the medication drawer closing. The hospital had survived. The extraction had succeeded. And no one outside the room, outside the floor, outside the building, had truly known who had made it all possible. She sat at the nurse's station for a moment, alone. Her hands folded. Her eyes lowered. She did not breathe any easier. Control had been exercised, lives had been protected, but the cost of speaking, and of being heard, remained quiet and personal. A clock ticked. Morning approached. The first ordinary tasks of the day would begin. She would perform them as she always had, silently, competently, without fanfare. The world outside would not know. And that was exactly as it should be. Her authority had been asserted. Her presence had shifted the course of events. And yet, she remained exactly who she had appeared to be. A nurse tending her floor. Nothing more. Nothing less.